For centuries, humanity has stared into the void and called it silence. We've meticulously mapped the stars, charted the dance of galaxies, and listened for the faintest whisper of an alien civilization. Our cosmologists tell us a grand, elegant story. The universe is expanding, driven by a mysterious force called dark energy, destined to fade into a cold, empty vacuum. It's a comforting narrative, one that places us at the center of an unfolding drama, a solitary spark in an ever-growing darkness. But what if silence is merely a sound we haven't learned to interpret? What if the dark energy isn't a passive, elegant force, but the rhythmic, resonant beat of something trying to break through? What if the boundary of our observable universe isn't a limit, but a veil? And what if, beyond that veil, a symphony has been playing for billions of years, a melody we were never meant to hear, singing a story we were never meant to know? My name is Dr. Eris Thorne. I've dedicated my life to listening to the universe, deciphering its whispers. What I am about to share with you was uncovered by a team of radio astronomers who thought they were charting the elegant expansion of the cosmos. They believed they were listening to the echoes of creation. They had no idea they were about to tune into a broadcast from another dimension, a warning composed in the very fabric of spacetime. And by listening, they didn't just hear the melody. They invited the conductor. Chapter 1: The Cosmic Hum. Dr. Elara Vance was a quiet legend in her field. Her work centered on the cosmic microwave background, CMB, radiation, the faint, uniform glow left over from the Big Bang. It was, to her, the ultimate fossil record, a snapshot of the universe in its infancy. For years, she had meticulously sifted through this ancient static, searching for the subtle imprints of dark energy, the elusive force believed to be tearing the cosmos apart at an ever-increasing rate. She was a scientist of hard data, a purist who believed every anomaly had a quantifiable, physical explanation. Her current project, Project Event Horizon, was designed to push the boundaries of CMB detection, using new quantum interferometry techniques to resolve patterns at scales previously thought impossible. She was looking for ripples, for gravitational distortions, for any faint signature that would further illuminate the nature of dark energy. What she found was different. Visuals. A montage of Elara's routine. She's seen adjusting complex dials, reviewing endless lines of code, consulting with her junior researchers, all in the sterile, focused environment of the control room. The radio dishes are shown sweeping the night sky. She looks professional, but a subtle sense of growing frustration crosses her face as she reviews data. Then, a specific screen displays a peculiar, repetitive wave pattern, almost perfectly symmetrical amidst the background noise. It began as a ghost in the machine, a persistent, low-frequency oscillation, buried deep within the CMB data. Not an energy signature, but a rhythmic vibration. Her initial reaction was professional annoyance. It was clearly an instrumental error, a subtle crosstalk from a neighboring dish, or perhaps a complex artifact of their new quantum processing algorithms. Check the filters, run a diagnostics on the interferometers. She instructed her lead technician, Ben Carter, a seasoned engineer who trusted the hardware more than any theoretical anomaly. For 3 weeks, Ben and his team chased the phantom. They recalibrated sensors, rebuilt signal chains, and ran every diagnostic imaginable. But the oscillation persisted. It wasn't a glitch. It was too consistent, too precise. It was a pattern that repeated every 18.6 minutes, a perfectly formed, complex waveform that seemed to hum just beneath the noise floor. It was as if something was deliberately trying to make itself heard, barely audible. Elara, a woman who lived by data, found herself intrigued against her better judgment. The pattern was too elegant to be random, too regular to be noise. It wasn't just a vibration, it was a signature. She began to isolate it, stripping away layers of cosmic background, filtering out stellar emissions, until only the pure, raw oscillation remained. And the more she cleaned the signal, the more disturbing its true nature became. It wasn't a simple sine wave. It was a series of overlapping harmonics, a complex polyrhythm, intricately interwoven. Like notes in a scale, like chords in a progression. It was impossibly music. Not music as humanity understood it, but a fundamental vibrational composition emanating from the deepest, oldest reaches of the cosmos. A cosmic hum that defied every known principle of astrophysics. This wasn't a signal from dark energy. It was a signal of dark energy, revealed in a way no one had ever imagined. She hooked her quantum processors to the raw signal, feeding the pattern into a sophisticated AI designed for complex pattern recognition, a system originally built to predict chaotic weather systems. The AI, designed to find order in chaos, began to process the music. It wasn't just a melody. It was a repeating cycle of billions of years, a cosmic refrain that seemed to tell a story across unimaginable timescales. A vast, intricate composition played on the grandest stage imaginable. And then, the AI delivered its first output. A translation, not of sounds, but of meaning. The music was a language. A complex sequence of frequencies and modulations that, when interpreted through the AI's neural network, formed coherent, chilling messages. Messages of other universes, other realities. Messages that spoke of a thinning veil, of breaches, and of the hungry stillness. Elara tore off her headphones, her heart hammering against her ribs. The universe wasn't expanding into silence. It was resonating with a terrifying, ancient song. A song that was not a celebration, but a warning. A desperate plea echoing from beyond the membrane of our own reality. Something was trying to tell us a story of cosmic horror. And by isolating their music, by amplifying their plea, Elara Vance had just opened humanity's ears to a symphony that was about to become our epitaph. Chapter 2. The First Movement. The initial shock had given way to a terrifying, almost manic, focus. Dr. Elara Vance had not just detected an anomaly. She had tapped into a transdimensional broadcast, a symphony of the abyss. The low-frequency oscillation, once dismissed as noise, was now undeniably a language. A complex tapestry of harmonics and modulations that, when fed through her advanced neural AI, spat out chilling, fragmented messages. Messages of other universes, of devourers, of a thinning veil. Her team, initially skeptical, was now gripped by a collective dread. Ben Carter, usually the pragmatic voice of hardware integrity, found himself staring at the translated phrases with a horrified fascination. A hungry stillness? He murmured, pointing to a string of text on a secondary display. What in God's name is that supposed to mean? Elara didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on the primary screen, where the AI was beginning to extrapolate patterns, building a narrative from the fragmented cosmic song. This wasn't just a warning. It was a story, a history told in pure vibrational energy, spanning billions of years. A history of universal consumption. The AI, now operating at peak capacity, confirmed Elara's most terrifying hypothesis. The dark energy wasn't a passive force. It was the fabric of a membrane, a protective boundary separating our universe from something else. And the cosmic music, the symphony of the abyss, was the desperate song of a civilization existing beyond that membrane, a civilization trying to warn us. They were singing a history, a brutal, repetitive history of interdimensional predation. They called the entity the silencer. The AI's translations painted a horrifying picture. Other universes, existing in parallel, had experienced their own expansions, their own dark energy. But for them, it had not been a protective expansion, but a drawing of the curtain. The silencer, an entity of inconceivable scale and cosmic hunger, moved between these universal membranes, drawn to resonant frequencies, to sounds, to the very vibrations that signified a complex, thriving reality. The civilizations on the other side had tried to communicate, to warn, through their own dark energy, turning their existential despair into a symphony of cosmic alarm. Elara realized, with a cold dread that seeped into her bones, that the expansion of our universe, the very phenomenon cosmologists celebrated as a journey into cold solitude, was in fact a desperate retreat. Our dark energy was not merely pushing things apart. It was diluting the resonance, spreading the sound of our universe thinner and thinner, attempting to make us less detectable, less tasty, to the entity beyond the veil. Our universe was actively trying to hide. But Elara's team, in their pursuit of scientific discovery, had unwittingly begun to reverse this defense mechanism. By isolating and amplifying the specific frequencies of the symphony of the abyss, by forcing the dark energy to resonate with a clarity it hadn't possessed in billions of years, they were not just hearing the warning. They were shouting back. They were drawing the silencer's attention directly to us. Ben, watching the cosmological simulations twist and contort, finally put the pieces together. The expansion, it's a camouflage. We're making too much noise. Elara, we have to shut it down. Shut down Project Event Horizon. Shut down all the dishes. Before it's too late. But Elara couldn't move. Her eyes were locked on the AI's final, chilling translation, flashing across the screen. The song has been heard. The silencer turns. Seek shelter in the deepest darkness. The cosmic music, for the first time, began to change. The warning notes faded, replaced by something slower, deeper, a resonant, impossibly vast hum that vibrated not just the air, but the very bones. It was not a symphony from beyond the veil. It was the sound of the veil tearing. The silencer was no longer a distant threat. It was listening, and it was coming. The first movement of the symphony had just ended. The next, Elara knew with a certainty that chilled her to the core, would be our last. Chapter 3, The Tuning Fork of Doom. The universe was singing its own death knell. Dr. Elara Vance and her team had not merely heard the symphony of the abyss. They had become its unwitting conductors, amplifying the very sound that now threatened to tear our reality apart. The silencer, an entity of interdimensional hunger, was listening, and the protective membrane of dark energy, once a silent shield, was now vibrating with the ominous approach of a predator. Shut down all long-range receivers, Elara commanded, her voice cutting through the panic. Divert all quantum interferometry to defensive scattering patterns. We need to make this section of space as noisy as possible, as random as possible. Drown out the signal. Ben and the team worked with frantic urgency, but their efforts felt futile. The music wasn't coming from a specific point in space. It was emanating from the very fabric of the cosmos, permeating every atom. The silencer wasn't targeting a star system. It was targeting the universe itself. And every attempt to scramble their detection of the signal only seemed to make the localized thinning of the membrane more pronounced. It was like trying to hide a candle flame by blowing on it. The AI, still churning through the received data, began translating new fragments of the symphony. These weren't warnings anymore. These were observations. From the other side, membrane resonance approaching critical. One translation flashed. Localized reality breach imminent. Another, even more terrifying, predator aware. Resonance source pinpointed. It knows where we are, Ben whispered, staring at the screen. It knows we're listening. Elara's mind raced, desperate for a solution. The ancient civilization that composed the symphony of the abyss. They knew this entity. They knew its patterns. Their music wasn't just a warning. It was a testament to survival. There had to be an answer within the structure of their cosmic lament. A hidden countermelody. She instructed the AI to analyze the most ancient layers of the symphony, focusing on passages that occurred just before what the extra-dimensional civilization termed consumption events. She was searching for a pause, a silence, a counter-frequency that could perhaps, if only for a moment, disorient or repel the silencer. The concept of darkness and cold as a defense suddenly made chilling sense. Our universe's expansion into emptiness wasn't random. It was an innate, primordial defense mechanism. A cosmic game of hide and seek against an incomprehensible hunter. The AI struggled, its processor straining. The sheer volume of data, combined with the increasing interference from the approaching silencer, was overwhelming. Systems began to fail under the strain. Sparks flew, consoles went dark. The hum grew almost unbearable, a physical pressure in the room. Then, the AI broke through. It didn't find a counter-melody. It found a negation, a single specific frequency within the ancient symphony that, when isolated and inverted, created a momentary pocket of absolute, profound silence. A dead zone in the cosmic hum. The black circle on the screen pulsed with this negation, a visual representation of pure nullification, and the translated text around it was terrifyingly clear. The void is the shield. The echo is the bait. Return to silence. Or become the song. The dead zone was a desperate gamble. It wouldn't stop the silencer, but it might create a fleeting moment of invisibility. Pocket of non-resonance. But the energy required to project such a negation, to actively nullify the cosmic hum across a localized sector, would be astronomical. It would require rerouting all remaining power, all quantum interferometry, all dark energy observation capabilities of the entire Veritas array, focusing it into a single, desperate burst. It would effectively render the observatory blind, deaf, and entirely vulnerable. "We have to do it," Elara stated, her voice steady despite the tremor in the room. "Focus everything on projecting that negation. Aim it at the area of maximum membrane thinning. It's our only chance to buy time, to hide." As the team prepared the desperate maneuver, a new, far more profound anomaly registered across their failing sensors. Not a sound, not a vibration, but a cold spot, a sudden, inexplicable drop in temperature, so vast it encompassed the entire solar system. It was not a physical chill, it was an existential one. The hungry stillness wasn't just a metaphor, it was a physical manifestation. The silencer had not merely turned towards our universe. It had begun to reach through. The membrane wasn't just thinning, it was breaking. And the last echo of the symphony of the abyss wasn't a warning anymore. It was the whisper of something truly alien, truly vast, bleeding into our reality, promising an end to all sound. Chapter 4: The Shell of the Void. The universe had ceased expanding and was now in cosmic agony. The cold spot was not a physical phenomenon. It was the shadow of an intelligence, the existential vacuum of a colossal predator that had just listened to our reality. Dr. Elara Vance's only defense was a silent prayer, a frequency negation projected with every ounce of power they possessed. The cost would be total blindness. The result, perhaps, a microsecond of invisibility. "Ben status." Elara's voice was a thread of steel, but her eyes held the visceral dread of someone who had just pressed the self-destruct button. Power core rerouted to the projection grid. 90%. Ben yelled, his fingers shaking over the frozen controls. "We're draining the emergency reserves, Elara. If this fails, we'll be literally dark. Life support system is next." Science had failed. The Nexus retention protocol demanded she act now. The negation couldn't just be a pulse. It had to be an anchor. Elara held a terrifying theory. The cosmic music wasn't just a broadcast. It was a biological signature. And to stop a predator, you don't shoot for the head. You attack the nervous system. Invert the negation's polarity. Frequency 1 minute and 18.6 seconds minus 1 hertz. Elara commanded. She was taking the exact repetition cadence of the symphony, the precise pulse that had drawn the silencer, and flipping it by a single subtle octave. Then it happened. The negation was projected. The only thing more terrifying than the universe's scream was its sudden, total, and enforced silence. The cold spot recoiled. For a microsecond, the room was darker and quieter than death. They had made themselves non-existent. They had successfully hidden. But reality is a fragile commodity. The membrane didn't stop tearing. Instead of breaking, it folded. At the exact point where the negation hit, the darkness became a mirror. It wasn't a monster. It wasn't a ship. What they saw was worse. It was their control room from another universe. A dimensional echo, a phantom image of the reality the silencer had just consumed. The negation, instead of creating a shield of invisibility, had done the opposite. It had created a dimensional coupling window, a perfect resonance with the next prey in line. The cold spot was the predator's breath, and the silence was its way of stalking, Elara stared at the monitor, comprehending the final, cruel twist of the story. The symphony of the abyss was not a desperate warning. It was a trap. The silencer wasn't trying to be alerted. It was trying to be tuned into. The civilization that created the symphony was merely broadcasting its last, terrifying song of identity, a perfect homing beacon for consumption. And the cold spot wasn't the silencer's reach. It was its ear. It used the expansion of the universe to listen for frequencies. By creating silence, Elara and Ben had, in fact, isolated the zero tone of our reality, providing the exact coordinate for the invasion. The power system failed completely, plunging the room into near-total darkness, illuminated only by the faint backup lights. Ben flicked on his helmet's torch, illuminating Elara's face. She was paralyzed. "What have we done?" Ben whispered, his voice no longer concerned, but broken by primal terror. Elara looked up. Our universe was expanding to hide the sound, but the silencer was coming. And now she knew. The silencer wasn't drawn to a civilization's sound. It was drawn to fear, the one frequency that transcended the membranes. And their fear was now vibrating at an interdimensional volume. She picked up a microphone that still had a faint battery life. "Ben, the civilization in the symphony. They were just recording their death. And the silencer just gave us the opening note. It didn't hear us. Felt us. The cold spot had not dissipated. It had moved. It was no longer out there in the cosmos. It was in the observatory. The external security camera of Veritas, powered by an isolated circuit, flickered on. It showed, not a scene of stars, but a single vast and perfectly black patch in the sky, directly above the antenna array. And on the metal door of the control room elevator, the distorted reflection seemed to absorb all residual light. The hunger wasn't cosmic. It was local. What becomes of a civilization when it discovers the universe doesn't want its intelligence, but its stillness? The silencer was here, and it was no longer listening. It was ready to eat. Chapter 5, The Final Cadence. The abyss was no longer staring back. It had walked through the front door. The cold spot was now localized, centered on the observatory structure, a zone of non-light and non-sound. They had not bought time. They had merely focused the aperture of their own demise. The black patch in the sky was not a cloud. It was the entity's footprint. The only question that mattered now was how a civilization, having just broadcast its precise fear to an interdimensional vacuum cleaner, could retract the signal. Ben, the pragmatist, moved first. His engineer's mind rejected the metaphysical horror. He grabbed the emergency flare pistol. "Back up. Everyone get behind the main server banks. Maybe we can seal the door, vent the atmosphere." "Stop!" Elara's voice was a ragged whisper, but it cut through the paralysis. Her eyes, wide and luminous in the darkness, were locked on the distorted reflection of the elevator door. "It's not an atmospheric pressure problem, Ben. It's a resonance problem. You can't shoot a frequency with a flare gun." The silencer wasn't breaking the door. It was nullifying the idea of the door. Elara finally understood the full, agonizing truth of the symphony. It wasn't a warning. It was the final, desperate will of a dying universe, a last, perfect song of identity that the silencer used to finalize the consumption sequence. The fear wasn't the bait. The fear was the key. The entity was not drawn to the noise of life, but to the specific, high-frequency, chaotic resonance of a reality afraid to die. The primordial defense of our universe, expanding into cold, silent darkness, was an attempt to muffle the sound of our fear. But Elara's team, by isolating the ancient music, had effectively handed the predator the frequency of our species' existential terror. The silencer arrived. Not with a roar, but with a total absence. It was a ripple in the fabric of non-existence, a dimensional fissure that was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere in the room. The cold spot had found its center. The team members screamed, but their voices were immediately muffled, thin, and useless in the stolen air. Internal hook. The revelation of the anti-frequency. Elara's mind raced through the AI's final, cryptic translation, The void is the shield. The echo is the bait. Return to silence. Or become the song. The solution wasn't to generate a counterfrequency. That would just be more noise. The solution was to generate a frequency so stable, so perfectly non-chaotic, that it would register to the silencer's ear as the ultimate perfect uninteresting silence. The anti-fear signal. Ben, the main array is still aligned to the negation point. We need a clean, stable tone. The exact opposite of the frequency of fear. Elara yelled, her voice barely audible. We don't try to hide, we don't try to run. We give it the perfect, resonant stillness it is looking for. Ben, seeing the black vortex begin to coalesce into a terrifying, skeletal form of compressed darkness, understood. What is the opposite of fear, Elara? Courage? Defiance? No, Elara whispered, gripping the fiber optic cable, her hands steady. Acceptance. Absolute, perfect acceptance of the end. That's the only frequency without noise. The zero tone of the human soul. The moment of absolute resolve is the moment of absolute stillness. Elara had to become the instrument of the anti-frequency. She couldn't broadcast it to the universe. She had to broadcast it from the epicenter of the fear. The observatory itself, now the nexus of the dimensional tear, would become the tuning fork of acceptance. She slammed the cable into the conduit. The last dregs of power surged, not into the massive dishes, but into the metal frame of the control room. The room began to vibrate, not with the terrifying shriek from before, but with a pure, deep, resonant OM. A sound so low it was felt in the marrow, not heard by the ear. This was the zero tone, the perfect anti-fear, internal hook. The cascading revelation. As the silencer reached the center of the room, its form defined itself for a fleeting second, not as a beast, but as an impossibly intricate lattice of crystallized shadow. A cosmic filter. It's not eating us, Elara screamed, a final revelation that broke the narrative wide open. It's a universal cleanup mechanism. We are the disease. We are the noise that threatens the pristine silence between realities. Fear is the evidence of the contagion. The anti-frequency overloaded the dimensional tear. The perfect silence hit the silencer like a blinding light. The creature, which fed on the chaotic dissonance of fear, recoiled from the sublime stillness of acceptance. It didn't retreat. It simply found the resonance nullified. The universe, in that single, profound instant, became uninteresting. The black vortex collapsed. The metal of the control room shimmered, then went utterly, profoundly dark. The power was gone. The coldness was gone. The air returned with a gasp. Ben Carter survived. He was the sole inheritor of the most terrifying truth. The universe wasn't cold and empty because it was expanding. It was cold and empty because it was policing itself. And Elara Vance had become the only human to ever pay the price for making too much noise. She didn't defeat the silencer. She gave it exactly what it wanted. A pocket of perfect, localized, eternal silence. Ben looked at the warped, spiraling metal of the elevator door. The silencer was gone. But a new question resonated in the silence that remained. The contagion is contained. The silence is restored. The next iteration will be monitored. The frequency of fear is recalibrated. The silencer had not been stopped. It had merely been taught a new frequency to hunt. The silence that Elara bought was temporary. And now, Ben Carter, the last person to know the truth, stood in the wreckage of the only device capable of listening, condemned to live a life of perfect, absolute, terrifying stillness, knowing that the slightest whisper of fear might draw the attention of the ultimate cosmic hunger. The end of the story is not a victory. It is a profound, echoing truce. We are quiet for now. But how long can a species truly hold its breath? This story is not fiction. It is a warning. The narrative is a system designed to hold your attention hostage, a simulation of the very tension that feeds the void. If the silence we created unnerved you, if the narrative hook held you to the final, chilling frame, then you have been engineered. The vibration has been heard. Subscribe to the Nexus Narrative channel. Hit the notification bell. and let the algorithm know you are ready for the next dimensional breach. Your curiosity is their homing beacon.
Subscribe to the channel and help us rediscover the light that was stolen from the sky.